Hi there, Jesus Freak. You've asked 12 questions to atheists, and I'd really like to have a go at answering them all. I don't think that it's going to fit into the 10-minute limit that YouTube have on the videos, so I might have to cheat a bit and spread this out over more than one video response. I'll try and keep it as short as I can. Okay, question number 1. What would you need in order to become a believer? So I'm going to make an assumption here that you mean become a believer in Protestant Christianity rather than a believer in any of the other faiths that abound the earth. So that's somebody who believes in the God of the Christian Bible, who believes in salvation through Jesus. And I'm also going to make an assumption that you mean belief in these things as actually really existing rather than just being ideas or concepts in somebody's head. There's some things that can be judged from a purely internal moral standpoint, and they're going to be things like which political party you want to vote for, or whether or not you think the death penalty is right or wrong, whether you think that bigots should be allowed to preach hate because you believe in a free society and freedom of speech. Those are subjective, internal, personal value judgments, and they're going to vary from person to person. I don't see the argument for the existence of God and Jesus as being like that. I think it's a black and white, true or false argument. It's just objective. The God of the Christian Bible and Jesus, they can't have sort of existed depending on circumstances. We can't have something similar to them existing. You can't have Jesus being some amalgam of various historical figures. The Bible is very clear on this. It says that it's the true word of God, and that it's not open for discussion or modification or interpretation. So, with that in mind, debating about whether or not God and Jesus are real doesn't alter that reality any more than me debating whether my TV set exists alters the fact that it either exists or it doesn't exist. There isn't any kind of grey area, there isn't a maybe, there isn't any quantum superposition of states here. It's one or the other. It's either true or it isn't. So with that in mind, for me to believe in the God of the Christian Bible, for me to believe in Jesus, I need just one thing. I just need evidence. Consistent, plausible evidence that backs up the claims being made. And to give you an example of this, I believe in gravity. I believe in gravity because I understand how it works. I can see the effects of it, and I can demonstrate it working. I have the evidence. For something that isn't quite so plausible, if somebody came up to me and they tell me that they've got some kind of magic spinning wheel that will turn straw into gold, I'm not just going to take their word for it. I'm going to want proof. Just because it's written down in some fairy tale somewhere that this actually happened, that doesn't satisfy my requirements of plausible proof. Question number 2. Why are you an atheist? Well, I think I've already answered that in question number 1. It all boils down to the same thing, which is lack of evidence to prove that there is a God. I wouldn't believe somebody who told me that there was an invisible pink unicorn living in my back garden, and that isn't because I have any kind of definitive proof that this animal isn't there, but it's more that I don't have any evidence that it is there. It's a lack of evidence that makes me question that statement. And when it snows, the complete absence of any invisible pink unicorn footprints in the snow, or the complete lack of any little piles of invisible pink unicorn shit on the lawn, all of that to me lends more weight to the idea that there is no invisible pink unicorn in my back garden, rather than just assuming that because I can't prove it's not there, that it must be. I'm not 100% guaranteed to be right on this, I'll grant you, but the evidence that I have does lean to supporting the conclusion there is no invisible pink unicorn in my back garden. Question number 3. Why do you think a belief in deity has permeated almost every society and culture since the dawn of mankind? I actually think that this question is a really easy one to answer, but there's quite a bit to it. And I believe that it's got a lot to do with the way that our brains work. The reason I say that is so that we stand some slim chance of surviving in what's essentially a very complex and hostile world, our brains, and the brains of most animals, have to be able to form some kind of rough model of the world so that they can predict how it's going to behave. And so, say for example somebody throws something to me, my brain has to predict the path of the thrown item and make sure that my hands are in the right place at the right time to be able to catch it. So if we go back to prehistoric times, you've got a hunter who's throwing a spear. He needs to be able to predict where the spear is going to land and at what point the animal will be there so that it can make a kill. So there we are, we've got this sort of model in our mind that allows us to predict how the world is going to behave. But the thing is that the model itself isn't perfect. It's not a complete and true representation of everything. So if we go back to the example of something being thrown to me, my brain only really needs to know roughly how a thrown object behaves when it's thrown through the air. It doesn't need to know all of the details. It doesn't have to do some kind of great computation taking into account the initial velocity of the object, or air viscosity, or crosswinds, or variations in gravitational force and all that sort of stuff. It's a rough guess, and as I track the object coming towards me, that guess is adjusted by my brain so that I can move my hands into the right position and make sure that they're there to catch it. The model doesn't have to be perfect for it to work. What these models also give us, a key thing that they give us, is the ability to understand cause and effect. So I plant a seed in the ground, I water it, and it turns into a plant. So I have a cause and an effect. You planted the seed, the plant grows. If I throw a spear and it hits a vital organ in my prey animal, and that animal dies, then again I've got cause and effect. The thing is that because these mental models that we have are only really rough approximations, there is room for error in them. We don't always draw the right conclusions when it comes down to looking at cause and effect. But, and this is the key bit, because this modelling of the world is so vital to our survival, it's an inbuilt survival mechanism, we have it hardwired into our brains. And that means that if we see something we don't understand, we have a basic need to be able to explain it in some way. And sometimes it just happens that those explanations are way, way off. So in ancient times, mankind would watch the sun rise in the east, they'd see it travel across the sky, and then they'd set in the west. And their assumption was that the sun was moving. We know that's the wrong conclusion. On the evidence that they had, it looked right, but they jumped to the wrong conclusion. On a more human level, let's say you have something really awful happen, like a child die. Well, the belief that there is some unfathomable divine purpose behind this terrible event in your life is much easier to bear than believing that cruel, random, horrible acts just sometimes happen for no reason at all. And also, if you believe in an afterlife, then you have the comfort that you're going to see this person again. They're not gone for good, it's just a temporary absence. This just helps us deal with loss, and it helps us deal with mortality. If you think about the God figures themselves, then really all they are is an extension of parental figures. When you're a child, your parents protect you and they guide you and they love you and they nurture you. And the idea of a God, that offers a promise of a similar protection. It's really comforting to think that somebody's up there looking out for us. And it makes difficult things easier to explain and easier to bear. You can just say, God did it, or it's part of God's plan. So I've tried to answer the question, but I do actually have a problem with it because I think that it's flawed. There's this sort of implicit understanding in the question that just because an idea has commonly been held throughout history, it somehow gives it value, it somehow makes it valid or right. And that isn't the case, it's just wrong. That's flawed logic. I've already mentioned the idea of the sun moving across the sky, and there's a whole load of other stuff. The list is endless. You've got the flat Earth, the geocentric universe, it just goes on and on. So, just because the need to have some kind of supernatural agent to explain something we don't understand or to give us comfort is what gives rise to the idea of gods. It's understandable why these ideas have arisen, but it doesn't make them right.